Welcome everybody to the next chapter in Aging Now What. I am the co-host, Jessica with ClinCloud Clinical Trials, and I am actually going to be interviewing my co-host, Ignacio, with North Star Senior Advisors today to learn all about the wonderful aspects of navigating through assisted living placement to care management, and really get to dive in and learn more about Ignacio and his company. So excited to be here, and let's go ahead and dive into it, Ignacio. So first, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Jessica. Yes, so Ignacio Quinones, I'm co-owner and president of North Star Senior Advisors. We've been in business here about 7 years, but a little bit about me first. I'm Army veteran. I got my nursing in the military. Was in healthcare for, since 2000 as a clinician, and then I dove into sales and marketing and healthcare, worked with a couple of pretty big entities, worked in operations, but we've been here in Central Florida now for about 7 years now with North Star Senior Advisors.
Fantastic. That's great. So I know that there's two components to your business. I know you have the senior advising, helping out with placement, but there's also the care management side of everything. Can you dive into a little bit more of the differences between those so that our viewers will be able to better understand?
Sure. So our core business has been what's called senior placement. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we help seniors and families navigate through their senior living needs and options, which can include independent living, assisted living, memory care communities. And then we've added care management. It just made sense for us. Mm-hmm. As we were helping families in the past navigate through their senior living options, we found that there was a pretty significant need for their loved ones, mm-hmm. either prior to placement or post-placement. And that's where a care manager can really come in and provide that assistance. Yeah. So we do both things now.
That's great. That's great. And it's a family business, isn't it?
Yes. My wife founded the business, mm-hmm. and we still work together. And we have actually our oldest son is one of our advisors too.
Oh, that's fantastic. Really keeping it in the family. So how are your services paid for as we're kind of going through this? Because I know they'll probably want to know that. It's a big component, right?
Yeah, great question. So from a placement perspective, through North Star Senior Advisors, our services are complementary to the seniors and our clients. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we function similar to, a good analogy would be maybe real estate agents, if you would, for the space. So we help families find appropriate options. We figure out their level of care need, their budget, geography, but always the care is going to be what's most important, mm-hmm. to match that appropriate option. We set up tours, we accompany them on tours, and then so that entire service is at no cost to the families. The way that we are paid is from the senior living communities that they select. We get a marketing fee from them. On the care management side, mm-hmm. that is privately paid. That is a little different, yes. So we have the care managers go out, do an initial assessment, and help them with their needs, and that is privately paid by the families.
Okay. And can insurance help to cover that, or it's just straight out of pocket for that?
It's straight out of pocket right now, mm-hmm. yes.
Okay. So I know that you're great. I don't know if everybody else knows you're great. So why North Star Senior Advisors versus these other, agencies that might be doing similar services to you? Yeah,
great question. So one thing that we take pride in is we're boutique. We're small. We're here in Central Florida with boots on the ground. They are services like ours that operate nationally. Mm-hmm. They don't really know what's going on at the local level with these communities, especially now and kind of where we're at in today's world with staffing shortages and everything like that. So we have more of an insight, mm-hmm. from these communities on what's going on. So that's always going to be an advantage to our clients. Mm-hmm. But we really dedicate the time. We go all out for our clients. Our Google reviews speak for themselves. But we just take great pride in how we execute our service. And we've helped families place, and they stay in contact with us even years after. They still connect with us.
That's great.
Yeah, they share our information with their neighbors. So mm-hmm. we take great pride in what we do.
I have a question. My parents are getting older, right? They fully are able to make decisions on their own and everything like that, which is great. But there are times where I get concerned. So do you have a lot of caregivers or family members that come to you before maybe somebody who's actually who will be placed in that mm-hmm. facility? And how does that work?
Yeah, great question. So we spent a significant amount of time putting seminars together, mm-hmm. to really empower the community, provide educational resources, It is an advantage, without a doubt, to have folks come in prior to something being an emergency, because then they can plan accordingly, align resources, and make that decision and that transition in their terms. So we do put together seminars. Folks come in, they learn for their parents, sometimes for a spouse as well. So that's very helpful, and we highly encourage that.
That's great. That's great. Does experience and credentials matter when working with a placement provider?
Yes, it does matter. It matters a lot. So when we, our credentials, let me just say that. So I'm a nurse myself. We're all certified dementia practitioners, so we understand the stages of dementia, Alzheimer's, and what those needs may look like, not just now, but in the future. So when you're looking to place your loved one, you want to make sure that the diligence is done so that the first placement for your loved one is the one and only, if you would. So working with somebody that has the credentials, that has an understanding of what's going on, it's extremely important.
Now, North Star isn't all over the country, right? It's only here in Florida.
Central Florida, yes.
Central Florida. So if I have somebody who's listening is out of state, what are some of those key credentials, or where can they find, maybe on a website or whoever they might be working with, to make sure that they're actually going to the right senior placement advisor? Yeah.
So I would say a couple of things. One, Google local senior placement provider. You should have some options that come up. Research the company, look at their website, make sure that they're indeed local. They hopefully should have some reviews on Google as well, so you get to see how they've executed that service. But it is important to connect with your local senior placement advisor. There are companies that are national. Again, they operate in a specific state, and they're trying to do placement in another state without boots on the ground. And it's just not going to be the best outcome from our experience when you do
It's
that.
not as boutique, right?
It's not as boutique. The diligence is not there. So it's very important for you to deal with somebody that's local.
That's great. It's wonderful that we have a white glove service like this in the Central Florida community. Can seniors and families do this alone, or do they need to be a part of a senior living facility?
You can technically do it alone, and the analogy I like to give is, if you're in the market for a home, for example, you can definitely drive around town to open houses until you find the right one and make that purchase, right? Or you can go with a real estate agent, for example, and then they're going to guide you and help you navigate through the process and present homes that are going to be potentially exactly what you're looking for, right? So similar to us. So yes, you could technically go out and try to figure this out on your own. It's just going to be, you won't have all the facts potentially, okay? You're not going to have all the information you need to make a sound decision. So that's one thing I can share with you, that families that we work with, they walk away feeling extremely confident on their selection and decision because they've been presenting all the facts and all the potential options, and then they get to make that decision.
That's great. That's great. So you're really taking into account not only the needs of the individual that you're placing, the family members' needs, and you're also looking at what their future needs might be too, right? I mean, especially if somebody maybe at this point in time isn't having memory concerns, but down the line, they might have a family history. So you want to make sure that there's that memory care facility that's also a part of where they might be going to.
Yes, that's a good example. So on the clinical side, we do that. Give you an example. So if they're, let's say, diabetic and they need insulin, in the state of Florida, there's 4 license types for assisted living. So we want to make sure that as they progress through their aging process, if it gets to the point where they can no longer administer their own insulin, they're going to need a very specific license type in an assisted living. So families that are going to go at this alone may not know that, and then they may place their loved one in a community that's not going to have that license, and they won't find out until they can no longer perform their own insulin, and then they're going to be given a notice to transition into another community, which can be costly, as you can imagine. It's a little bit of an emotional toll because they've already established friends. So we put in the diligence in the beginning to make sure that we factor in their needs now and in the future for a proper placement, and that's where the credentials come in again.
That's perfect. Are assisted livings regulated and licensed in Florida?
Yes, so they're regulated through what's called ACA, and as I mentioned, there's 4 license types, and they get inspected pretty frequently. I'll say about every 2 to 3 years, and they have to go through a licensing and renewal process. But they're monitored pretty closely, okay? And that information is actually public information. If you go on ACA, on the website, you'll have their license. You'll get to see if there's any fines, deficiencies. So that's all public information. And we run those checks for all the communities that we represent twice a year.
Great. Great. And what were those? You mentioned that there's 4 licenses. Can you share what those 4 licenses are?
Yeah. Standard license is going to be your baseline. And then after that, it's what's called Limited Nursing Services, LNS for short. And basically, it's just a higher clinical perspective. They've actually taken the investment to have clinical staff, nurses, LPNs, RNs, but they're also licensed to do certain things like injections and things like that. The next level is ECC, Extended Congregate Care, very similar to the LNS. Biggest difference is going to be they can accommodate PEG tubes, for example, if it gets to that point. And then the other license is going to be limited mental health. So that's very specific for those that have, for example, schizophrenia, bipolar, not to be confused with Alzheimer's and dementia memory care. It's a little different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big difference.
That's great. That's really great information. How does North Star Cares differ from North Star Senior Advisors?
So North Star Cares is our care management line. So in terms of difference, it's going to be the service itself. So our care managers, a lot of folks don't really understand what a care manager can do per se. It can be pretty wide ranging. They can help with coordinating resources at the home, setting up appointments, aligning resources from a financial or legal perspective, estate planning. And prime example of when a care manager can come in and help is if they're, if the son or daughter is out of state, out of town, and their loved one is local but doesn't have a lot of help. They can deploy a care manager to go in, do a very thorough assessment, create a care plan for the loved one, and report back to the son or daughter, as an example, on what it is that their loved one needs. So the care manager can then help execute that care plan beyond the initial care plan with care management services through North Star Cares. So that's the difference. And then North Star Senior Advisors is our placement side.
Okay, perfect. So I was looking at your website, and I know that you are doing placement. And a lot of the times I feel like when I'm at least interacting with family members, the first thing is you have to go into an independent living before you go into assistant, before you go into memory care. So is that the case? Is that the narrative? Or what is the difference between independent, assistant, and the memory care placement?
Okay, so first part of your question, so folks can come in and take advantage of assisted living per se, right, without having to. It's really going to depend on their care needs and that individual assessment. If you're at home, I would always say if you can stay at home as long as you can, safely, that's the key word, right? If you can stay home safely, do so. That's going to be your best bet, okay? The issue is always going to be if you can no longer do it safely or if it becomes too costly at home. Because sometimes even if you do, let's say, private duty home care, 24-hour care, it's easily going to be, over $10,000 a month when you factor in the hourly rate. So then maybe from a cost perspective, it makes sense to now leave the home and go into an assisted living. You don't have to go through the stages of independent, assisted, and then potentially memory if you have that diagnosis. I just want to point out independent living is just that. It's completely independent. So what that means is that the individual that's going into the independent living is not going to get any kind of assistance provided for them because it's independent. So they are standalone communities. There are independent living communities that are not licensed to provide any level of care. Okay, so you got to think about that, right? Now there are some communities that offer the full spectrum. They have independent, assisted, and memory, so they can progress in-house through those options.
Perfect. That's great. And then you help transition them along the way, or once they say they got in for independent living and they are needing help, going back to your example with the insulin, they can't provide their insulin anymore, they're diabetic. Do you help transition, or at that point, whatever facility they're a part of, they would transition them into the next stage, for instance?
So ideally, if we're involved and we do the initial placement, we factor all that in, right? So let me give you an example. So let's say we're helping a family, and this happens a lot, where there is a dementia diagnosis, but is extremely early staged. So what that means is they can technically go into the assisted living side of things and continue to thrive and benefit from the assisted living side of things for, could be months, could be years, but as we present options and we do that placement, we factor that in so that they go into an assisted living that has a memory care option. Because as you know, it's a progressive disease, right? So it will get to the point where they will need that environment. So then that's done in-house.
Got it.
Ideally, that's the case.
Got it.
But there's been times we can help if, for example, they're independent living and now they need to go into assisted or memory, that we can do that too.
Okay. What are the average costs in senior living? I think we kind of alluded to that before, but.
Yeah, good question, of course.
Yes.
Money is always going to be.
It's always everybody's top first point.
Yeah, especially when something is privately paid for the most part. So for assisted living, the average cost is close to $3,500 a month, okay? There are some more affordable options, not a lot, and then it can go higher from there, okay? One thing to think about is that typically assisted living, the cost is room and board, that base price. There's going to be an additional cost for care. So whatever the care needs are, okay, there's going to be an additional cost tied to that. And typically they're done in levels, and that can get a little complicated, but just know that there's going to be additional fees as the individual needs more care. For memory care, for those with advanced dementias and Alzheimer's, typically the rate is all inclusive, and the average rate for that is typically around $4,400 a month. It's more expensive, as you can imagine, because the amount of care involved for those, caring for those with Alzheimer's and dementia is more intense. It's more hands-on. You have to do a lot more for them, obviously. So for that reason, memory care is always going to be probably at least $1,000 more a month than traditional assisted living.
Which makes sense, absolutely. I mean, just navigating that moderate to severe stage of the disease, it's challenging, but it's good that you can be in one location and have all those needs met.
Yes.
Which is great. What will help pay for senior living? So maybe, I'm considering things, or my parents are considering things, and they're like, well, I'm going to look at my budget. How can they maybe offset payment if it's not all coming out of pocket?
Yeah, so we get a lot of calls, and first thing they'll say is, well, I have Medicare, Medicaid. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, it is mostly privately paid. There are three things that'll help pay for senior living, assisted living, or memory care. Number one is going to be maybe a long-term care insurance policy, and those are a little rare. Not that common, but those policies, depending on the policy itself, there's a daily reimbursement, and that can be anywhere. I've seen it as low as $50 a day, and I've seen it as high as $400 a day, which is a phenomenal policy. So that can either help pay for some of the cost, or depending on the policy, the entire cost of the assisted living. The other benefit is a veteran benefit. It's called the VA Aid and Attendance. It's a military pension for those that qualify for that benefit. There's a specific criteria through the VA, but it can be either for the veteran or the spouse of the veteran or surviving spouse of the veteran as well. So that can be a really good benefit as well if they qualify for that. And then the last one is going to be here in Florida. Every state's a little different, but here in Florida, it's called the Medicaid Long-Term Diversion Program. Okay. It's a state-specific program for low-income seniors. You have to qualify for that as well. But those are going to be the three things that can potentially help pay. Not, except for the long-term care insurance policy, depending on the policy, nothing will really pay for the entire cost of assisted living, which is important to know.
That's great. That's great information.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add in terms of the services that you're able to provide? I mean, number one, I already want to know how can our viewers be able to get in touch with you and your team? So what's the best way to get in contact?
Yeah, so a couple ways. You can give us a call. Our office number is 407-796-1582. Feel free to visit our website. We have a pretty good interactive website. We have a pretty awesome video gallery, tons of videos, various topics and resources. And our website is northstarsa.com, Northstar, S like senior, A like advisor. But But again, just highlighting the benefits is just you'll be presented and educated on the options to make this simpler and have a sound decision at the end of the day.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for all that information. I know I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure all of our viewers really enjoyed it too. So make sure to check out North Star Senior Advisors. We'll make sure to link all of the contact information below, and have a great day.
Thank you.